just like Arnie, to turn something nice about him into something nice about all of us, right? So I want to welcome Renny Cushing and Barbara Keshen to come up here and join me. And as they make their way, they need no introduction. They are icons of the movements here in New Hampshire and nationally for death penalty abolition, for civil rights and civil liberties, for transformative justice, for all manner of justice and peace. So we're just delighted to have time with you this evening to walk down memory lane together. And what does this? Oh my, is that a
Just
picture?
in case, probably some people were here the last time I wore this. At our 21st anniversary. The shirt shrunk a lot. I washed it today, though. This is all about Arnie.
So we have some time to hear some stories from Renny and Barbara about their journey alongside Arnie over many decades. And I want to plant a seed, depending on how we do time-wise. We may have an opportunity before we wrap up this segment for people in the audience to just stand and share something quite brief about what Arnie has meant to you in your own shared work for justice here in New Hampshire. So just be thinking about that, and the way may open for that to happen. We shall see. So I'm going to let go of this microphone in just a second, but I want to say that as you take it and you share it between you, it's important to hold it right up here. That's how it works best. I want to start off by asking each of you to share how you met Arnie for the first time and what your impressions were from that moment.
Hello, everyone. Wow, I'm so privileged to be able to be sitting up here and speaking about someone that I adore, Arnie Alpert. And I'm sure that I have the single most unique experience with having met Arnie. I came up to New Hampshire in 1985 to prosecute homicides in the Attorney General's office. And on occasion, they asked me to do other things than prosecute homicides. And one of the things that they asked me to do when I first came up was to prosecute this group of individuals that had the audacity to go into Senator Warren Rudman's office and pray for peace in Nicaragua, and then refused to leave. So they were arrested for trespassing. And I came up, and the case was in progress when I came up. There were motions based on the First Amendment that were being handled on other people in the office. But if the case had gone to trial, I would have been the trial lawyer that would have been in court asking a jury to convict these guys. Arnie Alpert, Martha Yeager, Don Booth. I looked at that list of people and I went, I'm new to New Hampshire. Here's a list of people I would like to know. So I did not meet Arnie back in 1985, but I think it's fair to say that I became totally obsessed with him. That's not a joke. I prosecuted handled 100 homicide cases as a prosecutor, as a defense attorney. I think I obsessed about this case probably as much as any single case. Because the question for me at that time was, how am I going to prosecute this group of people that I have fallen in love with, that I respect, that I admire? What am I going to do about this? And on the one hand, there's Arnie. On the other hand, I'm receiving calls from Senator Warren Rudman saying, how's the case going, Barb? Great, it's going great. So I spent a lot of time thinking about Arnie, thinking about Martha, thinking about Don, thinking about what they were doing, thinking about what was motivating them. and about how I was going to present this to a jury. I spent a lot of time reading, things about civil disobedience and trying to craft arguments. And what I basically thought about was that, I'm going back a long time ago now, but, I would talk to the jury about, you can admire these people, you can respect these people, you can agree with these people, but these folks have made a decision to break the law and knowing what the consequences were. And you can't take that away from them in some ways, folks. You have to allow the law to be the law. And if you don't like the law, work to change it, but this is what you have to do. So that's the argument, Arnie, that I would have made to probably send you to jail for, a minute. So I didn't get to meet Arnie back in 1985 because Judge Manias was a good judge, and he said, they have a First Amendment right to be there, state, go away. But I became obsessed with them. I truly did. I looked at the papers all the time. I saw what they were doing. I admired their work so much. They were always Don, Arnie, Martha, the other folks there. They were always in my perspective and horizon about what they were doing. And it was kismet for me many years later when I finally did get to meet with Arnie. If I have a chance, I have one other story I'd like to tell maybe a little bit later.
I hope so.
But I just want to say, since I got asked to do this tonight, I've been reflecting on that time. And one of the things that I reflected about is I came up to New Hampshire and I found this incredible group of people. I had come from the Boston area. I had been reading the Boston Globe every day. As far as I knew, there wasn't a group in Boston that was praying for peace in Nicaragua in a senator's office. There wasn't a group of agitators who were raising conscience the way these people were. And so when I look at it now from this perspective of 35 years later, I'm even more impressed and have even more admiration for what that little band of agitators were able to do in the Concord area.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Barbara, I'm sure if the case had gone to trial that the concept of jury nullification would have set in and Arnold would have been acquitted for doing righteous work. I met Arnie when I was 24 years old, and I'm supposed to bring things back to the AFSC because Arnie wants us to be anchored at, but when Arnie made a pilgrimage to an old Quaker town in New Hampshire, to Seabrook, and he turned to the site where actually, at the Shapley line is the place where in 1662, there was a member of law enforcement who halted the whipping of Quaker women who had been marched and whipped in every town from Dover down to Seabrook. So there was an act of civil disobedience on the part of law enforcement. Well, 315 years later, Arnie came to New Hampshire, to the Seabrook atomic site, and was one of 1,415 people who were arrested in the largest mass arrest in the history of the state of New Hampshire. So what I have in common with Arnie is we got arrested together. and that brought him to, it actually brought him to Concord for the first time too, but those are his stories to tell. But I have memories of Arnie going back to the days of the Clamshell Alliance in the late 70s when somehow he was from Connecticut and then he was from Portsmouth living in Seacrest Village, and we were part of a interesting little collective, office collective of people who were just busy about doing all the work because the struggle against Seabrook wasn't just the struggle against, it was about power, and it was a struggle against lots of, forms of injustice. Over the years, I kind of have these cascading memories that I've been going through, and I couldn't help but remember seeing Arnie in the role of exercising of his fiduciary responsibility to, I believe it was his grandmother. There was a little organization we assembled called Stockholders for Corporate Responsibility, which was an organization of stockholders, a public service company that realized that our responsibility to our company was not limited to the cashing of quarterly dividend checks, the routine signing of management proxies, and otherwise just being good people, but we had a responsibility for things done in our company's name. And from time to time, we would sponsor stockholders' resolutions, and Arnie was the proponent of a stockholders' resolution. And I just have this interesting moment of Arnie cleans up real nice, you know. Arnie at a stockholders meeting, making a point, standing up in front of people who, this is not a place where it's one person, one vote, so it's one share, one vote, but nonetheless, Arnie with his share was certainly going to be able to make his point. And it was great because I know that everybody else in the room knew that although Arnie was talking about his fiduciary responsibility and the best interest of the shareholders, everybody kind of thought that maximizing profits was not all that he was about to do that day. That he actually, he was there to talk about corporate responsibility, to talk about, you know, to bear witness and to act on beliefs, as Arnie does all the time, everywhere, and has been as long as I've known him. I was thumbing through a few old files and came across just some glorious nuggets, but I believe, I was trying to remember, Arnie, when did Jim Finnegan first label you as the useful idiot in the union leader?
We were focusing on nuclear weapons and probably trying to get the working for a halt to nuclear weapons testing, I think. And I was that was how I knew I'd made it in New Hampshire. That was when I got attacked in an editorial by the editor of the Manchester Union Leader. A terrible photo. They found the worst photo they could get.
And so
and the title of the editorial was "Useful Arnie et al." So that, it's my community.
So I always loved that Arnie really burst onto the front page of the Manchester Union Leader in its heyday, and it's true. That's when you know that you do make it, for what it's worth. And I also have memories of Arnie. I think of Arnie as being this anchor. It's almost like, I kiddingly would say rent a demo, but it's whenever there's a moment of injustice that has risen up in the past 4 decades, Arnie has been there, has been this networker, has been this voice, this organizer, this anchor for resistance, this anchor for advocating for the beloved community in our state. And it's, you talk about whether it was that damn Contra war that went on, or whether it was, the moment when all of a sudden we're doing Operation Desert Storm, or when I have memories of Arnie with remember the New Hampshire Committee to Free Southern Africa. I'm going, I came through this process. Well, that one works too. There's another thing to check off. South Africa got free because of activities that took place here in New Hampshire as well as every other place in the world. And then his leadership, really for 2 decades of advocating for New Hampshire to recognize the importance of Dr. King and his legacy, the importance of this moment of confronting American apartheid in this country, and everything that it stood for. It was just an amazing struggle here that we all know about, that Arnie was in many ways the public face of it, and the key organizer. And every year we'd go back, and every year it would happen. And I found a letter that Arnie had sent me about 31 years ago, a little note, and it was after I had warranted an editorial in the Manchester Union Leader by Mr. Finnegan. And Mr. Finnegan had criticized the Martin Luther King Committee for recognizing me because I had the temerity to say that, talk about Dr. King's commitment to, peace, against the war, and talked about what happened with why we needed Martin Luther King Day, and also talked about what happened with the bigotry and the homophobia and the attack that was then going on against same-sex people who loved each other, who wanted to raise children. It was a vicious, but it was a good intro. And Arnie wrote me this letter just saying, like, I hope you've enjoyed the Union Leader editorial, because I've been quoting what it said all around for the past couple days, and that was just like, that was a nice little note that I got. And at some point we can talk about the death penalty too.
Yeah, so you're already doing this, but let me just put a fine point on it. Stories are such a potent way of carrying nuanced and complex and rich truths. So continue to talk as you have been, and Barbara, maybe with the story that you wanted to share, about the ways that Arnie approaches this intersectional and long-term work for deep social change rooted in community. So take it from there.
Okay, so this is the perfect story for that.
Okay, good.
When I finished my career with as a legal director with the New Hampshire Civil Liberties Union, a fabulous job. And I got to represent a group of people that were arrested for trespass again in Manchester for the Occupy Manchester movement. And Arnie was going to be, I think there were maybe 15 of them or something like that, people that were arrested for trespassing. There had been an encampment on the Manchester Green, and we thought it was going to be sanctioned by the city, but ultimately the mayor lost patience and had people arrested, if they wanted to be arrested, otherwise they could disperse. And of course, Arnie had been one of the people that was instrumental in organizing that Occupy movement here in New Hampshire. So we go to Manchester District Court. And at that time, I had been a lawyer for, I don't know, about 140 years. I made a really rookie mistake. I didn't go over my testimony with Arnie before I put him on the stand. What I wanted from him was sort of background about how the movement came to be, what an organizing was. So in my mind, the Occupy case was a grand opera. And it was filled with grand themes and oratorios, and in my mind, it was this production. And I wanted Arnie to talk about these grand, what it's like to be part of a sweep of history, and what it's like to organize people and see something come to life that begins with a kernel of a couple of ideas, a couple of people talking about, and what goes into taking it from that stage of sitting in a room to this sweep of people and tents and on the green, and food being delivered, and powder parties being donated, and neighbors volunteering to have people come and give showers. I mean, it was, as I said, in my mind, all I can say, it was an opera. But I didn't tell Arnie this. And I assumed at that point we had been working together very closely, and I assumed that he knew it. So I put him on the stand, just right here, raise your right hand, tell us the truth, tell us blah, 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 blah. Okay, Arnie Albert, what do you do for a living? I work with the AFSC. Well, what do you do there? I'm an organizer. Okay, Arnie, and this is the moment that I want him to orate. This is his aria. I want him to explain his work, all the passion that goes into it, all the heartache, all the detail, everything. I said, Arnie, can you please tell the judge, what do you do as an organizer? And he said, mostly I go to meetings. To you.
me of my children as they were growing up asking me, "Pa, do we have to go to another one of your boring meetings?" But it's also one of the things I think about with Arnie and the impact that he has had on the state, because he's been a teacher and he's been a mentor, and he's somebody who always is conscious of bringing along the next generation. He knows that he's part of the heir of this legacy of social justice, but now he's a steward and has to pass it on. And in my own personal life, I know that through my children, how my children look at Arnie and look at Judy, in part because, it's part of the background of your adults' world. And as they became teenagers, and particularly through like AFSC's youth organizing work, one of my daughters became involved in it. And there was like this very cool moment as you go to the World Fellowship Center and, she gets to stay up late and do a board game with Arnie, who talks to her just like she's a regular person. And it's kind of like he's like someone he actually like validates stuff for young people. It's just, that's pretty precious. Not everybody remembers to do that, and that's part of what, I'm grateful for Arnie for doing.
Yeah. Thank you. So you've worked alongside each other in long campaigns, and most recently the successful campaign to abolish the death penalty here. What Arnie's and AFSC's contribution to that long campaign was, given that you were both such critical leaders of that work.
Well, of course. So 2006, as you know, was the year in New Hampshire that the death penalty sort of sprung out of its cave. And two people were charged with capital murder. And that was the year that I had left the public defender's office and I had started my role with the New Hampshire Civil Liberties Union. And the New Hampshire Civil Liberties Union had been involved for as long as there was a death penalty movement in New Hampshire. And now it was my chance to get involved. And this is, that year is a turning point for me, because that is really the year that I started to work with Renny, started to work with Arnie, and we started to build up the coalition and this movement to repeal the death penalty. And I didn't know anything about organizing or how to start anything. So, I worked very, very closely with Arnie. He was really the go-to guy. So here are some of the impressions that I have with Arnie over that 14-year period. I think if I had and I saw him from that point actually in many, many other different contexts. We worked with I helped with some immigration work. I went up to Conway and saw Arnie in a room full of teenagers. Oh my God, it's amazing how he just is able to reach out. He's curious about everyone. He respects everyone. He wants to know about everyone. And that's very genuine, and people respond to him in a way that I have never seen with anyone else. We used to vigil just a little story, we used to vigil on Friday afternoons against the death penalty at the State House. And people would come, sometimes there'd be a lot of people, sometimes there'd be a few people. And at the end of it, when I was there, everyone would say thank you, everyone would disperse. When Arnie was there, he taught me, no, Barbara, you need to reach out. And at the end of the vigil, Arnie would draw people into a circle and say, who are you? What brought you here today? What was this experience like for you? It was much more community and sharing. It was a much richer experience. And I'm a little bit of an introvert, but I learned how important it is to do that with Arnie. So if I had to say the one thing that I learned, the lesson that I took from Arnie through the death penalty work, and I hope that I will carry with me through life, is you have to lead with love. we had so many disappointments in that 14 years. People who we thought were with us, who at the very end looked up at us and voted against us. And that, it really hurts, and it can make you angry. And the thing that I learned from Arnie and also from Renny is that it's not personal, and you can't, I've never heard either of these two men say a bad word about someone that was opposing us or someone who had disappointed us. It was never ad hominem, never personal. What Renny would say is, well, I guess he hasn't evolved as much as we thought he had. But he will evolve. And they were right, it took a long time, but people do evolve. And that's what I learned. You lead with love from them. You lead with respect, and you lead from humility. It became apparent to us sort of early on that, you know, as much as we wanted to repeal the death penalty, as passionate and as articulate as we might have been, we might not be the best messengers for every single person. And there had to be other voices involved. And we had to be humble enough to hold back and empower other people, people that we might not agree with in any other respect, to carry that torch for us to the people that mattered. And I learned that from them, that that's how you bring people in rather than push people away. And it's about bringing people in, it's about leading with love, it's about respecting people's views, it's about giving people space to evolve,